Welcome to Revolution Chronicles. The German King Tiger once ruled the battlefield until America's 90mm gun roared back in 1945 and shattered its legend. Stay tuned and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold moments of history. Asterisk, there was a time, not so long ago, when the ground trembled before the German King Tiger. It was the most feared tank of the world. Wore to an iron fortress rolling through Europe with confidence as thick as its armor. To Allied soldiers, the sight of that massive turret and the deep growl of its Maybach engine meant one thing: trouble. The King Tiger wasn't just a tank, it was a symbol of German engineering, pride, and the belief that no enemy could stand toe-to-toe with it. Its 88mm gun could destroy any Allied vehicle before it even came within striking range. Its armor was so thick that most American and British shells simply bounced off. Tank crews who faced it often said the same thing: if you see one prey, it doesn't see you first. But by early 1945, the war was changing. The once invincible German army was retreating. Cities lay in ruins. Supplies were running thin. Yet even in defeat, those massive tigers rolled on slow, stubborn, and dangerous across the battlefields of Western Europe. American tankers and their Shermans had learned to respect and fear the German beasts. They'd seen what the tigers could do, how one could destroy a whole platoon in minutes. For years, the American crews fought with courage, but they knew they were outgunned until now. By March of 1945, a new machine had arrived on the front lines, the M26 Pershing, armed with the powerful 90mm gun. It wasn't just another tank. It was America's answer to years of German dominance in armored warfare. And soon, that answer would echo through the ruined streets of Cologne. The King Tiger would roll out, confident as ever. Its crew would laugh, sure of their strength. And then they'd meet something they never expected: a tank that could finally look the tiger in the eye. Asterisk, the winter of 1945 hung heavy over Europe. The snow had turned to slush, the roads to rivers of mud, and the once mighty German army was breaking apart under the weight of its own war. Town after town lay in ruined smoke curling from rooftops, church spires shattered, streets littered with burned-out trucks and twisted steel. The war was nearly over, but the dying embers of the Reich still burned fiercely in its war machines. For Allied soldiers pushing through Germany, victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like exhaustion. Men who had been fighting since Normandy were now crawling their way across bombed-out villages, faces hardened, eyes empty. They had seen too much: friends lost, tanks burned, and towns turned into ghostly shells. And still, in those last desperate months, one enemy weapon continued to inspire fear: the Tiger II, known to the Americans as the King Tiger. It wasn't just another tank, it was the monster of every tanker's nightmare. Weighing nearly 70 tons, it was bigger, heavier, and deadlier than anything the Allies could field. Its long 88mm gun could punch through the front armor of a Sherman from over a mile away. Its armor up to 7 inches thick on the front shrugged off most American shells like pebbles. Allied soldiers spoke of it in hushed tones, describing it as a moving fortress. When the King Tiger rolled into a town, the ground itself seemed to quake. Its deep mechanical growl echoed through the streets long before it appeared. Even veteran soldiers, men who had fought across France and Belgium, felt a chill when they heard that sound. The Americans had faced German armor before: the smaller Panzer IVs, the deadly Panthers, but the King Tiger was something else. It was built to dominate, to remind the world that German engineering still reigned supreme, even as the Reich crumbled. But behind the Tiger's power was desperation. By 1945, Germany's fuel was running out. Supply lines were shattered. Many Tigers were abandoned not from battle damage, but because there was no fuel left to move them. Still, the crews who manned them were among Germany's best experienced, loyal, and deadly accurate. Across the lines, the Americans had their own problems. The M4 Sherman, the main use tank of the war, had proven reliable and fast, but it was painfully outmatched against the Tiger. Sherman crews had learned to rely on numbers, teamwork, and courage. They'd swarm the German tanks, trying to flank them, hit their weaker sides, and survive long enough to fire again. It was brave work, but costly. Many Sherman crews went into battle knowing they might not come back. One American tanker famously sighed, "We'd see the Tigers before they saw us, and we'd pray we could run before they fired." That all began to change when the first M26 Pershings arrived. The Pershing was America's answer to years of German dominance in armored warfare. It was heavier, better armored, and carried a weapon that could finally go toe-to-toe with the Tiger, the 90mm M3 gun. Unlike the Sherman, the Pershing's shells could pierce even the thick armor of a Tiger if aimed right at first. Only a handful were sent to Europe. The war was nearing its end, and many doubted they would make a difference. But for the crews who got them, it felt like the tide was turning. For the first time, they had a tank that didn't make them feel helpless. The Germans had ruled the battlefields for years with machines like the Tiger and Panther, but the Pershing was something new, fast, deadly, and American through and through. It wasn't just a tank. It was a statement. A symbol that America had learned, adapted, and was now ready to fight on equal terms. The first true test came in the heart of Germany, in a city shattered by war, where rubble filled the streets and church towers stood like broken monuments. It was there, amid the smoke and silence, that the two giants would finally meet. On one side, a King Tiger, confident, its crew certain of victory. On the other, an M26 Pershing, its gunner steady, its crew untested but determined. Both machines represented their nation's pride, their technology, their will to endure. And when they met, history would record more than just a tank battle. It would record a turning point. The moment when the symbol of German might faced the steel of American innovation. And lost. The city of Cologne, March 1945. The war was in its final weeks, but you wouldn't know it standing there. The air hung thick with dust and smoke, the sky a dull gray, and the streets were choked with debris and silence. The once beautiful cathedral still towered above the ruins, its spires scarred but unbroken, casting long shadows over a city that had forgotten what peace sounded like. Through those ruined streets rumbled a monster, the King Tiger. Its massive treads crushed bricks and twisted metal beneath its weight. Each movement echoed through the hollow buildings like thunder. The tank's dark, angular armor was coated in soot and grime, but it still carried an aura of invincibility. Inside, the German crew was calm, confident. They had survived countless battles, outgunned and outnumbered, but still alive. Their Tiger, too, was one of the last of its kind in the region, and though they knew the war was nearly lost, pride kept them going. To them, every shot fired was a reminder that they were still feared, still respected. The gunner, a veteran from the Eastern Front, smirked as he peered through the sight. "No American tank can touch us," he muttered. The others laughed tired. Laughter, the kind that hides fear but clings to old belief. Across the city, down a narrow street littered with rubble, another sound began to rise. It was lower, steadier, the heartbeat of a new kind of machine, the M26 Pershing. Its crew of 5 young Americans had been ordered to advance cautiously into Cologne, clearing the streets one block at a time. They'd heard rumors of a German heavy tank in the area, but they hadn't seen it yet. Inside the Pershing, the crew was tense. The gunner, Corporal Clarence Smoyer, kept his eyes pressed to the sight, scanning the horizon. The driver gripped, the controls tightly, sweat running down his temple despite the cold. Over the radio, a voice crackled, warning them. Enemy armor ahead. Big one. Smoyer's stomach dropped. A tiger. They'd all heard the stories. How the 88mm gun could split a Sherman clean in half. How it could destroy a tank before the crew even saw it. But this wasn't a Sherman. This was the new Pershing. And for the first time, they had a fighting chance. The commander leaned forward, voice steady. Stay low. We'll take the shot when we see her. The Pershing crept forward, its treads grinding softly over shattered pavement. Every window, every alley felt like a threat. The city was a maze of shadows and silence. Somewhere out there, the King Tiger waited dot, then dash movement. Through the gun sight, Smoyer caught a glimpse of something massive crossing an intersection. A flash of thick armor, the long snout of an 88mm cannon. His pulse quickened. There. He whispered dot. The commander raised his binoculars and froze. No doubt about it. It was a Tiger. A King Tiger. The two tanks were only a few hundred yards apart, separated by rubble and empty streets. For a moment, neither moved. It was as if time itself was holding its breath. The German crew was the first to react. The Tiger halted in the open street, its massive turret beginning to turn. They hadn't yet spotted the Pershing, but they knew danger was near. The commander barked orders in sharp German. The loader slammed a shell into the breech, and the gunner steadied his aim. Inside the Pershing, Smoyer's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the sight. He could see the Tiger's turret turning slow, deliberate, terrifying. Gunner, on target? On target. Range? 800. The commander's voice was calm. Fire when ready. The Pershing came to a stop behind a pile of rubble. The engine hummed low, the gun steady. Through the shattered window of a building, the muzzle of the 90mm cannon found its mark. Smoyer exhaled. Just one breath. Then, boom! The shot ripped through the air, the recoil slamming through the tank like a heartbeat. The 90mm shell screamed down the street, striking the front of the King Tiger with a blinding flash. For a second, nothing. Then sparks, smoke, a dent where the armor once seemed invincible. The German crew jolted inside, momentarily stunned. The commander shouted, the loader scrambled to ram and around, and the Tiger began turning its turret toward the source of fire. Inside the Pershing, the loader was already working furiously. Reload. The second round clanged into place. On target, Smoyer muttered. Fire! Another thunderclap. Another hit. This time the shell pierced. A burst of fire erupted from the Tiger's hull. Flames spilled out of its side vents, black smoke rising into the cold air. The mighty King Tiger began to slow. Its turret froze mid-turn, its confidence gone in an instant. Inside the Pershing, no one spoke. They just watched, breathless, as the beast that once terrified them burned quietly in the street. In that moment, everything changed. The myth of the unstoppable Tiger was gone. The Americans had just proven what few had dared believe. The king of the battlefield could bleed. The silence after that first shot was deafening. For a split second, no one moved. Not the German crew, not the Americans. The smoke from the Pershing's gun drifted slowly down the ruined street, mixing with the dust and ash that never seemed to settle in Cologne. The faint hum of the Pershing's engine was the only sound left, a heartbeat echoing in the aftermath of thunder. Inside the King Tiger, confusion erupted. The first 90mm round had slammed into the frontal armor, leaving a deep, jagged crater. The crew stared in disbelief. They'd been hit head-on, and the shell hadn't bounced. It had bitten. The commander shouted, "Schnell! Return fire!" The gunner twisted the traverse controls, swinging the heavy turret toward where the shot had come from. The loader heaved a massive 88mm shell into the breach, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the casing. The smell of hot oil and burnt paint filled the cramped compartment. Through the shattered periscope, the gunner spotted the faint flash of movement, a glint of steel between the ruins. The Pershing dot he fired. The recoil jolted through the Tiger's hull, the shot tearing down the street and smashing into a nearby building. The structure exploded in a storm of bricks and dust, but the American tank was untouched, hidden just enough behind rubble and smoke. Inside the Pershing, the crew flinched as debris rained down on the turret roof. "That was close," shouted the loader. "Stay steady." The commander barked. He missed. "Line up again." Smoyer steadied his aim, peering through the gun sight. He could see the Tiger's gun flash, fading through the haze. The enemy tank was turning slightly, trying to bring its thick frontal armor toward them again. "Range 750, Smoyer muttered. "Adjusting." The loader slammed in another shell. The commander's voice was low, measured. "Take him." Smoyer took a breath and squeezed the trigger. Boom! The second 90mm round streaked downrange, hitting the Tiger squarely on its lower hull plate. The impact was instant, a blinding flash, followed by a burst of fire that leapt from the tank's belly dot inside the Tiger chaos. The shockwave knocked the loader to the floor, his ears ringing. Flames licked at the engine compartment. The commander yelled for the crew to bail out, but it was too late. The tank's interior filled with smoke and choking heat. The driver's hatch burst open first, a German tanker scrambling out, his uniform singed, coughing violently. Then another. The rest didn't make it. Through his sight, Smoyer watched them run from the wreck, stumbling, half blinded by smoke. He didn't cheer. None of them did. The commander lowered his binoculars and whispered, "Cease fire." The Pershing sat in silence as the black smoke rose higher into the sky, curling above the cathedral towers like a funeral flame. The mighty King Tiger, a terror of Allied tankers, burned quietly in the middle of the street, its once proud turret sagging to one side. The crew didn't speak for a long time. When they finally did, their voices were soft, part disbelief, part relief. "We got him," the loader murmured. "Yeah," Smoyer said, almost to himself. "We finally got one." It wasn't victory they felt, not exactly. It was something heavier, quieter. They all knew what that burning tank meant. The war was ending, and the balance had shifted. The Tiger's shadow over Europe was fading. Across the street, the flames hissed and cracked. The Pershing's engine idled softly, the smell of cordite still hanging in the air. The gun barrel glowed faintly from the heat. A few minutes later, American infantry moved up cautiously, their rifles ready. They stopped when they saw the burning tank and the Pershing standing guard behind it. One of them whistled low. "Is that a Tiger?" The commander nodded. Was? Word spread quickly through the American lines. The impossible had happened. A German King Tiger, destroyed head-on by an American tank. Photographers and war correspondents soon arrived to capture the aftermath. They filmed the smoking wreck, the Pershing parked just a few yards away. That footage would later become one of the most iconic pieces of tank combat ever recorded, proof that the tide of armor warfare had truly turned. For the crew inside, the Pershing. Though it wasn't about glory or fame. It was about survival, and about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that. For once, the playing field was even dot in that narrow street in Cologne. Under the shadow of a half-ruined cathedral, two titans of steel had faced each other. Only one drove away Dot, and as the Pershing's engine rumbled back to life and the crew rolled forward, none of them looked back at the burning Tiger. They didn't need to. They'd already seen enough to know. The legend was over. Asterisk when the smoke finally cleared over Cologne. The silence felt strange. almost wrong. The echo of that 90 mm gun still seemed to hang in the air, as if the city itself refused to believe what had just happened. The Pershing sat motionless at the corner of the ruined street, its engine rumbling low, its crew staring through the haze at what had once been Germany's most feared weapon. The King Tiger, that towering symbol of Nazi strength, was now nothing more than a blackened shell. Flames flickered from its open hatches, licking at twisted steel. The air smelled of burning oil and gunpowder. Inside the Pershing, no one spoke. Smoyer slowly lifted his head from the sight and exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The tension drained from his hands, but the shaking stayed. The commander leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the burning Tiger. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's the end of their big cats." It wasn't said with pride. It was said with the weight of men who'd been hunted for far too long, for nearly 2 years. American tank crews had whispered about the Tigers, those invincible German beasts that could destroy a Sherman before it even got within firing range. The mere rumor of one in the area could send a chill through an entire armored column. They'd seen what an 88 mm could do. They'd seen tanks vanish in fireballs, crews gone before they even knew they were hit. But now, staring at that burning wreck, the myth was broken. Word traveled fast. Within hours, infantrymen passing through the city were pointing, staring, whispering. "That's the Tiger they got? That's the Pershing crew? You mean it didn't even scratch them?" For the first time, the morale of the American tankers soared. It wasn't arrogance. It was vindication. The long nights of fear, the endless talk of superior German armor, it all ended right there. In the streets of Cologne, across the lines. The German story was very different got when news reached nearby units that a Tiger II had been destroyed by a single American tank. Disbelief turned to dread. Tank crews who once rolled into battle with unshakable confidence began to question their machines. The Tiger had always been their shield, the weapon that made them feel invincible even as Germany fell apart. But now, the Allies had a weapon that could punch through that shield. The invincibility was gone. One German officer, later captured, reportedly said, "When we heard the Americans had a new heavy tank, we laughed. But when we saw what it did to our King Tiger, we stopped laughing." It wasn't just a battle. It was a psychological blow, a shift in the very balance of fear. For the men of the Pershing, though, victory brought little celebration. They knew they were lucky. One wrong move, one missed shot, and they could have been the ones burning in that street. War didn't offer second chances. Smoyer would later recall the moment with quiet reflection. It wasn't joy. It was relief. We'd finally proven that we could fight them and win. As night fell over Cologne, the streets glowed faintly from fires still burning in the distance. The Pershing's crew remained alert, their tank parked beside the ruins of the Tiger. The two hulks stood there, one alive, one dead, symbols of a changing world. That single encounter would echo far beyond that street. The film captured that day would be shown across America, proof that the tide had turned, that American strength and ingenuity had triumphed over German engineering. It wasn't just the destruction of a tank. It was the death of a legend by the spring of 1945. As Allied forces closed in on Berlin, the once mighty Tiger would vanish into history. Its reign ended not by numbers, but by evolution. And somewhere in the quiet of Cologne, a handful of weary American tankers sat in their steel beast, watching the smoke fade into the night sky, knowing they had witnessed the moment when fear itself was finally defeated. The King Tiger had rolled confidently into battle. The 90 mm gun had answered back, and history, forever, had changed. By the time dawn broke over Cologne, the city was quiet again, eerily quiet. The smoke from the burning Tiger drifted lazily upward, curling between the broken spires of the cathedral. The Pershing sat in the pale morning light like a sentinel, its dark silhouette outlined against the ruins of a dying war. For the men of the 3rd Armored Division, the battle was over, but none of them felt victorious. They had seen what war looked like up close, not the glory from posters or headlines, but the truth. Fire, fear, and silence afterward. Inside the Pershing, the crew finally climbed out. Their faces were blackened with soot, their uniforms streaked with grime and oil. Smoyer glanced back at his tank, the long barrel still faintly warm, the steel hull scarred but intact. He looked across the street to the Tiger, now nothing but twisted metal and charred paint dot. It was strange that such a monstrous machine, so feared, could look so fragile in defeat. The men walked slowly toward it, rifles ready just in case. The Tiger loomed there, its turret slumped, one side burned through by the Pershing's 90mm shell. The once proud German cross was barely visible under the soot. The commander of the Pershing stopped a few feet away, staring in silence. "That's what's been chasing us all this time?" he muttered. "Doesn't look so tough now." No one answered. They didn't need to dot in that moment. The Tiger wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol. It stood for everything the Allies had fought against. The arrogance of invincibility, the cruelty of conquest, the belief that power alone could decide history. And now it was gone. For years, the German Tigers had ruled the battlefield with fear. But the end had come not with a roar, but with a single, precise shot. The American crews who saw the footage later felt something stir in them. Pride, yes, but also something deeper. A sense that after years of struggle, sacrifice, and loss, they had finally proven that no machine, no army, no empire could outlast the resolve of free men fighting for something greater than themselves. As the war drew to a close, the Pershing became more than a weapon. It became a promise. The promise that the next generation of soldiers would never again go into battle outgunned and outmatched. The lessons learned from that street in Cologne would shape the future of American armor for decades. Back in the ruins, the crew climbed into their tank once more. The commander gave the order to move out. The Pershing's engine growled to life, echoing down the empty streets as the treads began to roll. They left the Tiger behind, a silent monument to a fading empire. As the Pershing disappeared into the gray morning mist, only the sound of its engine remained, a low, steady hum cutting through the stillness. The war wasn't over yet, but the balance had shifted. The tide that had once carried German steel across Europe was now flowing the other way. The King Tiger had come to symbolize fear, domination, and power. But on that day, in that narrow street of Cologne, it met something stronger: courage, precision, and quiet American resolve. And from that day forward, the myth of invincibility was gone. The King Tiger's rule ended not with fanfare, but with a whisper, the whisper of a 90mm shell, fired by men who refused to be afraid any longer. The battlefield was changing, and so was history. The giants of iron were falling, and in their place rose something far greater, the unshakable will of ordinary men who stood their ground when it mattered most. Asterisk, as the dust of war finally settled across Europe, the story of that single encounter in Cologne became more than a tale of tanks. It became a symbol of change. The King Tiger, once the pride of German engineering and the terror of every Allied tanker, had met its match. The myth of invincibility that had haunted so many men was shattered by a handful of determined Americans and one powerful 90mm gun. That moment marked more than just a battlefield victory. It represented the passing of an era, from the dominance of fear and tyranny to the rise of courage and innovation. It was proof that even in the darkest corners of war, human grit and ingenuity could turn the tide. When the footage of Cologne reached audiences back home, It stirred something deep in the American spirit. Families watched, proud yet humbled, knowing that their sons, farmers, mechanics, factory workers, were out there standing against the fiercest machines ever built. The Pershing wasn't just a tank. It was a symbol of American resolve, forged in steel and sacrifice. History often remembers the machines, the guns, the armor, the horsepower, but it's the people inside them who define what those machines become. The men in that Pershing weren't superheroes. They were tired, cold, and scared, but they fought anyway. And in doing so, they reminded the world that courage doesn't roar. It endures. The war would soon end, and the king tigers that once roamed Europe would rust in fields and museums, relics of a fallen empire. But the story of the Pershing, of the men who refused to run, continues to echo across generations. It reminds us that no force, no weapon, no empire built on fear can stand forever against the strength of freedom and the will of those who defend it. So as we close this chapter of history, take a moment to remember the men behind this steel, those who faced impossible odds and never backed down. This is their story, their courage, and their legacy. If you felt that history come alive today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Revolution Chronicles, where we bring the forgotten echoes of the past back to life, one story at a time, because history isn't just about what happened. It's about who we became because of it. Decades have passed since the streets of Cologne echoed with the roar of tank engines and the crack of gunfire. The war is long over. The soldiers who fought it are mostly gone. But the story of that one battle, the moment when the King Tiger met the Pershing, still lingers like a ghost in the history of armored warfare. Today, both machines rest in museums. The Tiger II, with its thick armor and monstrous cannon, sits silent, its steel faded, its once feared gun muzzle rusted. Children stand before it in awe, unable to imagine what it once represented. Across the ocean, the M26 Pershing stands preserved too, clean, restored, its 90mm barrel pointed skyward, as if still watching over history. Visitors take photos. Guides tell the story. But few can truly grasp what that encounter meant to the men who lived it. It wasn't about who had the bigger gun or the thicker armor. It was about endurance, the human kind. The American crew that faced the King Tiger didn't see themselves as heroes. They were simply doing their duty, one moment at a time, one street at a time. And yet, their courage changed the story of the war. The battle in Cologne became a turning point in how future wars were fought. The lessons learned from that confrontation shaped American tank design for generations, from the M46 Patton to the M60, and eventually the mighty M1 Abrams that dominates modern battlefields. Each carried a piece of that legacy, the belief that skill, adaptability, and courage would always outlast brute strength. The Germans had built their tanks to terrify. The Americans built theirs to end the fight, and perhaps that's the deeper story behind that. Day in 1945, when the King Tiger rolled into Cologne, it represented the old world, one built on domination and fear. But when the Pershing fired back, it represented something newer, something freer, the rise of a force built not just from steel, but from hope, teamwork, and the will to survive, even now. Historians revisit the film of that duel. They slow it down, frame by frame, studying every flash and puff of smoke. They call it the first real tank duel caught on camera. But beyond the analysis and documentaries lies a quieter truth, one that only those who've heard the echo of war truly understand. Behind every tank, behind every victory, are men, young, scared, far from home, who learn what courage really means. As time moves on and the last veterans fade into memory, it becomes our duty to remember what they saw, what they endured, and what they gave. Because history isn't meant to sit in glass cases or fade in reels of film. It's meant to be felt, to be carried forward. The Pershing crew didn't just win a battle that day. They preserved a legacy. A reminder that strength without purpose is hollow, and that freedom, though fragile, is always worth defending. So when we look at those two silent machines today, one a relic of tyranny, the other a testament to endurance, we see more than old steel. We see the story of an age, the courage of men, and the moment when the balance of history shifted forever. The King Tiger may have ruled with fear, but it was the Pershing's fire, guided by the steady hands of ordinary Americans, that proved one timeless truth. No empire, no weapon, and no tyrant can ever outlast the will of those who fight for freedom.